Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. If you are new here, we're all about optimizing the health and performance of the ageless athlete. We have tons of different guests from the health, medical, and nutritional field. So if you're into that type of thing, please subscribe. In today's conversation, Scotty Hagnes and I are sitting down and talking about all things ferritin. Why is ferritin levels in your blood important? How do you test them? And what are the implications if they are high, and how do we correct this problem? Guys, if you like today's podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, share with your friend, and enjoy this episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean Floch. I'm here with Scott Hagnes of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
It's going pretty good. Went through a good holiday and kind of back at it, trying to catch up. So I'm sure all the coaches know how that is.
I notice more than ever, Scott, that like when I take a 4-5 days off, like the subsequent week, I am so much better off. So much more like my energy's back. I enjoy being around people a little bit more. I mean,
yeah,
something to be said about taking a break every once in a while.
Taking a break, yeah. And then the trick, of course, is to not have so much piled up, whether it's clients trying to squeeze into a smaller time, more people in fewer days or more programs behind. That's where I run into sometimes having so much work to do. It like hammers me right off the bat.
Yeah. It's almost like you need like opportunities to like take the gas off of certain aspects of your work. And then like that allows you to like kind of do other things. So if you're constantly in person all the time and you're not able to get like the behind the scenes stuff, articles written, programs done, then like that stuff is kind of always waning in the back of your mind. But like if you kind of like aren't able to see people in person as much because everybody's away for a holiday, then you all of a sudden have this nice chunk of time opened up to like get your own stuff done that you wanted to get done. So,
right, yeah.
Yeah. So this was a topic that we wanted to get into for a little while now, and I'm very interested in it because you and I are actually on the same page with this one, Scott, and maybe you can give us a little introduction into this week's topic of ferritin levels in the blood and what that might mean and how to, and let's unpack this kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think we, episode last week or two, I mentioned that I had just given blood, and obviously, one of the things is it's just, it's needed, and if you're one of the small number of people that's actually eligible to do it, it's a great thing to do. Help your fellow man, but it can also have a really powerful, health impact for you to get rid of some of the stored iron that pretty much we are all carrying around now. Always thinking outside the box and looking at things differently. I have come to see iron, which typically most both conventional medical practitioners and most of the alternative practitioners, whether it's naturopaths, functional medical docs, et cetera, would say this is one area they would tend to be in agreement that lots of people are anemic or have low iron. But in doing, some research and reading some works of people much more knowledgeable in this area than myself, it begins to look like maybe that we have it all wrong. And that could be part of the problem with accelerated aging, inflammation, even insulin levels, and even our physical output, our ability to produce energy and not feel fatigued and tired. So they can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think a good follow-up question, Scott, is like, what is the difference between iron? So like when you get your blood work tested, you might see iron, and then you might see ferritin, because obviously if you're into chemistry at all, those two things are, almost like very similar. But what is the difference when it comes to the actual like effect and how it's read in the body?
Yeah. So ferritin is actually more of a storage, or transport substance, and it is not really iron per se. So, you'll typically see your things, transferritin saturation. You may get serum iron in a standard test. These things can tell you something, but I think the important thing to remember is that no blood labs can tell you how much iron you have stored in your tissues. All they're going to tell you is what's actually in the blood. And it's not really representative of what you've got stored at all. So there's different types. We have these iron that gets in our stored. It's basically iron that we can't use, ends up first stored in the liver, but over time that can become kind of saturated and then starts getting stored in other tissues. And this is where it starts to promote, inflammation, accelerated free radical activity, aging, various processes there. So by looking at ferritin, it's assumed that it's correlative to your iron status, but in the same way as the commonly used analogy, right? There's fire trucks at fires. So, did the fire, can we conclude that fire trucks cause fires? No, not really.
It's a great point. It's a great point, Scott, because I was actually listening to a very dense podcast today that was unpacking the blood work of a high-level professional bodybuilder, and it just so happened that they were talking about his ferritin levels, and they were elevated, I think 20% above range, and I believe they were speaking about how that is a marker for fatty liver disease. And you mentioned before that obviously if your liver is super saturated with iron, it's going to spill over and you're going to have ferritin levels elevated potentially. So like you said, and for this person who they were actually talking about, it's like, the first thing you think about is, okay, how are they getting iron into their body? Could this be that they're just over consuming iron and then that's why they're having these high ferritin levels? And everybody looks right to red meat, but in particular, this person was talking about how they had a pescatarian diet, so mostly fish. They wouldn't be over consuming iron, but obviously through anabolic steroid usage and that kind of stuff, your liver has to work really, really, really hard to get rid of all that stuff and buffer it out of your system. And that's where fatty liver disease actually happens. And I think 1 in 4 people have fatty liver disease. So there's a big stigma around it. It's like, oh, you're in a healthy person. So you're looking at the pinnacle of what the human body could possibly do. And you have people like that who have fatty liver disease. So it's not something that is just to sick populations. It's also to, there's varying factors with that. So,
yeah.
So
you can get,
go ahead, Scott. Yeah, you were saying?
I was saying, you can get iron in a number of ways, right? Well, red meat is one method, but it's certainly not the only one. We're certainly going to get a lot more in our water now through acid rain. There's a lot higher content of iron in the water, unless you're drinking, real good filtered water or bottled water that's actual quality. A lot of the time you're getting a lot there. And then the grain fortification is a potent source of it. Now, I know not everyone listening to this podcast is going to be consuming fortified grains like cereals and breads, but I pretty much guarantee that almost everyone probably ate those things for a lot of years in their past, and those things accumulate. And I've seen that research shows that the various iron filings essentially that are added to these grain products are by far the most absorbed of all the forms of iron. Up to 60% I think is absorbed. So there's another gateway.
I had Louise Gittleman on the podcast about 6 months ago, and she was shouting from the rooftops about stop using cast iron as well, because
there's another one.
Cast iron pans leach iron into your anything that whether you're boiling water or whatever, and people are head over heels about using cast iron because of the cooking stuff, and everybody has one of those iron skillets, and we're finding that obviously it's not something that's like, oh, you used it once. It's this leaching over time that you're talking about, that like by the ages of 30, late 30s, 40s, 50s, all of a sudden you're seeing this accumulation, and that leads to potentially some of these health issues that are associated with high ferritin levels.
Yeah. And it's sneaky because your blood work can still look pretty good and you're still accumulating in the tissues, and especially for a man, because we don't have, all those years of having a monthly cycle and at least losing some of it. And so, it's theorized that's one reason why women typically do live longer than men.
Great point.
Yeah. So
what you're saying, Scott, is bloodletting from the 14th century is going to come back into vogue.
And maybe in some way. I mean, maybe they weren't entirely wrong there, with that. Now, one of the other factors is, maybe you aren't completely loaded up with iron, but it's still a really good chance that your iron metabolism is not working right, because bioavailable copper is one of the other very important things. And that copper in the system actually allows for the iron kind of recycling system and building, red blood cells and such to work properly, because it's kind of the gateway to get iron out of the cells and into where it's being used. And copper is something that's usually pretty limited in a modern diet, even those eating really healthy, because liver is going to be the best source of that, but not just any liver, because grasses are actually really pretty high in copper. And so a grass-fed liver is going to have copper. And it's going to have some iron too, but the amount of copper is going to certainly offset that. Mm-hmm. If you eat conventional liver, it's going to have a ton of iron, and it's going to have some copper, but not nearly as much.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, I remember Chris Kresser talking about oysters having high copper content as well.
Yes, oysters are another great one. Yep.
Because I remember him talking about the importance of copper and how they're it's not very readily available in a lot of stuff. And it also brings up a great point as well, Scott, is that looking at these things mutually or without exclusively doesn't tell the whole picture. It's the interactions of these things. And that
absolutely
what really opened my eyes was when Rob Wolf we were talking to him about the importance of sodium but also calcium and magnesium, because all of those things kind of couple together in different ways and are buffered in and out of cells. And I imagine it's the same ways with these trace minerals as well, is that like one leads to the other, et cetera. And then some hinder others if there's accumulations and they work competitively.
Exactly. Yeah. The minerals all have basically ratios they work best in. And you can see, issues there, and where it can be where you have what would be a normal or good level of one. But if the one that opposes it is way too high or way too low, it's still going to create problems and issues there. And, magnesium is obviously another very, very important one in this whole process of having iron working correctly as well.
For sure. And I will have to follow up about this topic as well. We'll when I do actually the protocol, I will talk about this a little bit more, but I had a heavy metal toxicity urine analysis done a couple months back, and we put it on the back burner because I wanted to get the gut stuff taken care of first, and then we're going to go after a detox program there, which I can't imagine what that's going to look like. But I had things like, mercury and a bunch of different metals that were worthwhile of getting rid of, or at least using a protocol to minimize and kind of clear the hose, so to speak, after 35 years of probably interactions with some pretty gnarly heavy metals that may or may not be have caused issues and may cause future issues because of the accumulation and interaction with my body.
Yeah.
So
that'll be super interesting. Yeah.
So you mentioned high inflammation levels or maybe increasing inflammation levels in the body from high ferritin. Any other telltale signs of elevated ferritin levels, Scott?
I mean, it can be, it creates a whole downward cascade of symptoms. So the more, whether it's digestive issues, fatigue and lack of recovery, these sorts of things. One thing that really kind of kicked my ass to get going on this was realizing that I have some lipofuscin expression going on, which this is basically where a cell has gotten gummed up, and you have various factors that can cause this, and excess polyunsaturated fats can be one factor. Excess estrogen, excess aluminum, and excess iron are kind of the culprits. Well, I kind of did I really have no symptoms of excess estrogen. Doubting it's that. I haven't eaten significant, I've avoided polyunsaturated fats. One of the main thing I do try to avoid, and for many, many years now. So I doubt that's typically very high. I don't really think I've had much exposure to aluminum for a long, long time. Well, that leaves our good friend iron. And I do know I had some blood labs done. Probably 5-6 years ago. I was kind of on an iron kick briefly, and I was starting to read the one book that was really written about it at the time, and it got stolen when I was headed to an OPT seminar, and my car got broken into on the way to the airport, and I lost my bag. Well, that book I'd taken to read with me on the plane, and so I never ended up getting it again. But I had blood labs done at this time, and I knew that I had some elevated iron to get rid of then, and I honestly never got around to getting a blood draw. And so anyway, seeing this now, reading up on it. And then I just had one of my longtime clients, he gives blood all the time. He says he feels great. He kind of told me about how easy it is now. There's an app you get. You can find the nearest one. You sign up, you do a rapid pass. It's super streamlined. And
wow.
It was really, really easy. I drove maybe 15 minutes to get to the spot last week. I already have my next one scheduled. You can do it 56 days apart if you want. And I felt fine. I haven't felt fatigued. My workouts have been fine, so it didn't affect me in that way. So I signed the next one up, and it's literally around the corner at the supermarket the next time.
That's great.
So if anybody wants to get on doing that, super easy.
Yeah. Like I said, Louis Gittleman mentioned that, once you get to about 35, 40, you should probably give blood at least once, definitely twice a year. So I'll probably be getting on that. And this is part of the conversation that I wanted to get to as well, because there is a genetic polymorphism called hemochromatosis that could potentially cause high ferritin levels as well, which basically the enzyme that helps, or the proteins that help basically unbind iron to ferritin are not working properly in individuals who have this genetic polymorphism called hemochromatosis, which will cause increased ferritin levels, which isn't a fatal thing, but will cause health abnormalities and increase inflammation. And there's a whole host of issues with that.
Yeah.
But like you said, Scott, it can be mitigated by something as simple as giving blood once every 6 months, and in the process, doing some good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, there are some other ways to get it out of the blood. There's various things that will chelate it. But it's not, that would be a long, slow road. At least starting out, I feel that might work better as a maintenance kind of program. If anybody is interested, hopefully this doesn't blur it out. This book here is just by Morley Robbins.
Say that author's name again one more time, Scott.
Morley Robbins.
Got it.
And he's been on a lot of podcasts if anyone's interested in. And he was started out as kind of like the magnesium guy, but now it's kind of gone into iron and copper. And there,
he's the periodic table guy.
Yeah. So anyway, that book is I think it just came out a few weeks ago.
Great.
So if anybody wants kind of a deeper dive into his whole protocol around, nutrition, which involves liver and oysters and things like that, and getting rid of the iron and making sure you have bioavailable copper.
Yeah.
Which also Whole Food C is a really good source of bioavailable copper.
Okay. It's interesting, Scott, because, as we start to look at these things, I think one of the most important things for people to do is get regular testing and get baseline stuff. Because like you said, if 6 years ago you didn't have that blood work, you wouldn't have something to gauge it off of. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're not feeling bad, get some baseline blood work, get at least a comprehensive blood panel done, so you can get some potentially a lipid panel as well. There, I believe most insurances cover that preventative care, so you're not going to have to pay anything out of pocket. You go get your yearly physical, say you want a comprehensive blood panel with lipids, and if there's anything else that your insurance throws in for free, thyroid functioning tests at all, or I know vitamin D, that kind of thing. Get it all done. Get it.
Yeah.
Have it as a reference point, and do that now, so that in 10 years, when you're looking to make some interventions or something like that, you're like, okay, what is my starting point? What was I feeling? What was my blood work like when I was healthy? So now that when you're like, oh man, I just had 3 kids and my body's destroyed, you have like and you're like, okay, this is where you're
Something,
starting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not nearly as good. And again, like then, you don't have to be able to interpret any of this stuff. But if you then go to an interventionist, whether it's a naturopath, a functional medicine doctor, et cetera, you're coming in with something so that you have, okay, this is what your trend is. Because a lot of people are like, okay, what does that mean? They're like, that means nothing, because you don't know what it's come from. You have a reference range that's based upon a population. And oh, by the way, those reference ranges also vary from country to country, from sex to sex. So like
region to region,
region even, right? So by the way, if you're living in a highly populated urban environments, i.e. a city, you're going to have substantially different, toxicology and heavy metal, biomarkers than you will someone living in the country. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different variables that why go off of the reference range when you can go off of your own reference range, right? If you have like, if any 18-year-olds are listening to this podcast, get some blood work done now, because you're pretty much not going to get any healthier than you are right now. And then again, you can go ahead and use that as a reference point further and further down the road and try to get as close back to that as you can. And, and that's kind of what your life's purpose would be, is to maintain the blood work, the hormone profile, and, chromosomal, lack of deterioration that you have when you're 18. And hopefully you get that to your 110.
Yeah, no, I think periodic blood work is great. And I may try and do the really detailed iron panel. Has all kinds of markers, including copper and things like that. So I can actually see how everything's functioning. I just have to source out what tests I can get through insurance, which might have to do as an add-on. And
what's great though, Scott, is like a lot of this stuff is getting cheaper and cheaper, which is awesome. These a la carte services where you can get like, okay, I just want my heavy metals tested in my blood. Not that bad. And again,
certainly easier than it was.
Oh my God. Ago, you get, and especially if you're outside the United States where it's a single payer system. Oh my God. Like if you live in Canada, you're like, oh, I want a lipid profile. They're like, well, we got to see if you actually have any kind of metabolic disease first. And then we can get like, you can't just go in and be like, oh, I want a lipid profile. There has to be like a protocol to get it. Whereas if you go into like any general practitioner, like, yeah, no problem, I'll order it. So in some ways, our healthcare system has some advantages, obviously some huge disadvantages as well, but it's kind of leveraging the things that you can have and utilizing those services, whether they're free or minimal cost. But there is so much stuff out there that you can utilize. Anecdotally, I went across the street and got my physical and EKG last week, or about 2 weeks ago now. And they had a la carte services for lipid profile, comprehensive blood panel, vitamin D. I'm thinking, and by the way, the comprehensive blood panel is like all your kidney function stuff, all your liver function stuff, your hematocrit levels, your blood count, your white count, all that kind of stuff. Those are great things to have because they're inflammation markers. They're going to tell you what your baseline hematocrit levels are, just in case you do some kind of protocols later on. Looking at your liver and kidney function, like again, when you're feeling good, it's great to have those stuff so that when you fall to shit, you have a reference range and you know what to look for. If you're feeling like garbage and you notice that, 10 years ago when I was feeling optimal, these were my liver enzyme levels, and now they're 10 times elevated. It's like, okay, we have liver dysfunction in some way. But if you don't have that reference point, but they're in the reference range, you have no idea where to start. You know what I mean? So I'm such a growing component or growing proponent of just getting regular blood work done. And again, at least every 6 months, just to have those reference points and those data points. And then again, if you're doing some kind of like intervention, probably getting more frequently.
Yep.
Awesome. This is a great topic, Scott. And I'd love to hear what everything's going to look like, especially after you donated, to see if your ferritin levels did adjust from the donation and potentially what kind of effects it had downstream as well.
Yeah. I figure, one of two things. I don't know how this month will shake out with how busy December can be. If I can get like the full iron panel done here in the next few weeks before I do, ideally I would have got it before I did my first draw. Yeah. But I'll try to knock it out. If not, then it'll be after I've had a few, so I won't have a true starting baseline, but I'll still be able to compare back to those numbers I've got.
Exactly.
And I've had other blood tests since then. It's just that I didn't have such a detailed iron panel. They're more of some standalone stuff since then.
For sure. It makes you kick yourself when you do those things. You're like, man, I was there anyway. I might as well just have gotten it. But
yeah.
What's interesting also too, Scott, is I got blood work done through my functional medicine guy, but then also got blood work done at Quest Diagnostics for my bio. The app is called Inside Tracker. So it's I did that, and the ferritin levels were exactly the same. Like there was no difference from test to test, which is great to see. Yeah. Which is like, makes me feel good in some way, but also makes me feel terrible. Like, oh, I definitely have shitty ferritin levels, but also it makes me feel good in the sense that, okay, it's not a variation or like some kind of aberration in the testing. There's actually legitimate stuff there. And to the absolute like decimal point, my LDL was the same as well.
Wow. Yeah.
So like those are the ones, and the reason I mentioned those is those are the ones that were outside reference range and in probably in need of some intervention. So, I mean, looking at like what's changed for me, obviously I'm probably going through a little bit of liver distress because of having a kid and having destructive sleep patterns and overall higher amounts of stress. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because the ferritin never was a problem before. And I believe I had testing of ferritin levels. That being said, I'll have to go back, which I should have, and see if those ferritin levels, but if they didn't.
Were they high or low?
Before or now?
Now.
Oh, no, high, very high.
Okay.
Yeah. And before I did an intervention with the TRT, my BUN was high, which is I believe a liver enzyme, right?
Nitrogen, yeah. Or kidney.
Yeah, kidney function, correct. And I think and obviously I was having LDL elevation as well. Mm-hmm. So again, maybe some fatty liver type stuff. Again,
both of those can be potentially markers of some inflammation.
Yeah. And again, that's
who knows what, exactly where that's coming from. But.
For sure. That being said, I kind of knew where it was coming from, and I would say that's probably from lack of sleep.
Yeah. Okay. So right, definitely go with your first hunches for sure, and then see. Right?
Yeah, lack of quality sleep will probably kill you faster than anything else, other than maybe some kind of drug like alcohol or cigarettes. But even cigarettes take you 40 years.
They take you quite a long time, really.
Yeah. Like if I said to somebody, get 5 hours of sleep a night or smoke cigarettes, like half a pack a day, I might say a half a pack of cigarettes a day.
It might actually be healthier than 5 hours of sleep chronically. Yeah. Actually, I think it probably would be.
At least you can mitigate some of these stuff about the nicotine and all that crap. Like, I'll extra filter my cigarettes. You can't extra filter your sleep.
There's no, energy drinks aren't putting it back.
But I have some interesting stuff to talk about next time as well, in terms of some stuff that's been going on that's really helped my sleep, and I'm excited to see what blood work looks like, which I'm getting tomorrow. So,
excellent.
We'll unpack that.
We'll talk about that
next time, maybe.
Okay.
Awesome.
That sounds great.
Scott, if we want to get more of Scott Hagnes, how can we do it?
Well, you can reach out to me, scotthagnestraining@gmail.com, or DM me at scotthagnestraining on Instagram. And also you can check out there for things I've written if you're wanting to see more.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm Sean Floch. Give me a flochfitness.com, Floch Fitness on all the socials. I was teasing this for a while. I believe it's going to be released next week. We are going to be doing a Fix Your Front Rack 6-week program. It'll be released next week. I finished off the final recordings and all that kind of stuff. So it was a big chunk of work to do, but I am very confident in the final product. And I think it's really, really going to help people get after one of the most painstaking and frustrating areas of functional fitness, which is the front rack position. And looking like we're going to change some people's fitness just by working on some stuff for 6 weeks and really cleaning up some movement patterns that probably have been persisting problems that are persisting for quite some time. So get on the on flockfitness.com to get on the email list so that we can get the early bird pricing for that one. Scott?
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Awesome. Scott, I'll talk to you next week, brother.
Yeah, talk to you next week.
Take care, dude.
Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. You can do us a huge favor. And if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer on the podcast, you can email them to Sean@flockfitness.com, and we will be sure to answer them on the podcast. Specifically, let's ask questions about nutrition this week, and we'll be sure to answer those questions in our following podcast. Guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, review, share with a friend, and we will see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Thank you again to Dustin for coming on to today's podcast. If you are interested in working with Dustin, you can visit him on his Instagram page, Dustin Lebel, DustinLebel. On Instagram, shoot him a DM, and you can get started there. Guys, if you like today's podcast, do us a favor. Go online, give us a 5-star review. It helps grow the podcast more than you know, and it's free to you. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and we will see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.